want to move on to the prohibitions on smoking medical cannabis because I have interacted with many patients with debilitating diseases who smoke cannabis as their preferred method of dosage. Do you believe that banning smoking in your bill is constitutional, given that the Amendment 2 language specifically says that smoking medical marijuana in any public place was what was prohibited, but not in private?
Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Speaker. Yes, I do believe this is constitutional, and I would say this. The only place in the amendment that smoking is mentioned, it's mentioned as a prohibited item. Constitutional rights are obtained when they're amended by a declaring or affirming that this is a constitutional right. What was declared and affirmed in that amendment were the new conditions that would qualify a patient to receive medical marijuana.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Leader Rodriguez. To your point that the amendment prohibits smoking, yes, to be clear, it prohibits smoking in public places, not in private. So my question is that so many patients prefer smoking cannabis as the preferred method of use because of the fact that they can control their dosage. They can control their dosage more accurately because it's what they're used to and it's better than the products that are out there. So are you at all concerned that by prohibiting smoking cannabis in the bill that we have inadvertently pushed some of those legitimate medical marijuana patients out into the black market to get smokable cannabis?
Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Speaker. And I'm going to put a tip of the hat to a former colleague, former Representative, now Congressman Matt Gaetz. I reject the premise of your question. To begin with, this bill doesn't ban smoking. Smoking is already banned. The constitutional amendment did nothing to change that, in my view. It did not affirm that smoking was now a constitutional right. The second part of the premise that I reject is that individuals can control their dosage by smoking marijuana. There is no science, none, out there that indicates that that is the case. In fact, all of the science says, in addition to all the health problems that you get from smoking, the chief objection is you cannot control the dosage. Now, to get the same effect of smoking, vaporizing is an option, and in vaporizing, you can control the dosage. So that is the preferred method for people that need to receive their medical marijuana via that method, which is why it's been included in the bill.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Leader Rodriguez. Yes, but there are physicians who will prescribe smokable or would recommend smokable cannabis to some of these patients who qualified. So by restricting smoking in those instances, have we violated the very critical and important patient-physician relationship?
Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Speaker. I would say no, because what's been authorized under the Constitution is for the doctor to determine if the patient has the qualifying condition, to certify that they have the qualifying condition, and then to make a recommendation. The Constitution put out the methods or the conditions that would qualify, but they left it up to the legislature to define the methods of delivery. I believe the methods of delivery we have chosen are the proper methods of delivery because they are the methods that science supports, and they are the methods that will lead to better health outcomes for the Florida patients.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Leader Rodriguez. I know that you cited earlier in your answer a study that you had found that showed that smokable cannabis was harmful, and that for that reason we have banned it entirely in the legislation. I suspect that you won't offer other evidence, such as the fact that the CDC has never, in the history of recorded medicine, ever documented an incident where someone had fatally overdosed or died from smokable cannabis, but I'll leave that for debate tomorrow. There's a part of your bill that talks about authorizing local regulation and zoning to be no less restrictive than where alcoholic beverages are sold. But this is medical cannabis, and it's not being used for recreational purposes. We've spoken about that at length in committee. So shouldn't we be saying that the zoning restriction should be instead comparable to pharmacy zoning, for example, rather than alcohol? Why are we comparing the two?
Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Speaker, and that is a good question. We're going to go back to the first thing you said, though, which was when you said that CDC has never documented where there's been a case of someone dying from an overdose of marijuana. What I would say to that is this: just because something doesn't kill you doesn't mean it's good for you, doesn't mean it's good medicine for you, and doesn't mean it will improve your health outcomes. So you're comparing apples and oranges there, in my opinion. As far as the follow-up question, which I believe is a very good question, we actually chose that standard the way that got written into the bill was we had people who had come to speak to us that said that what they were seeing in their cities back home were either moratoriums until we passed something here in the legislature, or talk about where they were going to force these dispensaries to be located. And the areas of town where they were going to force these dispensaries to be located were not the areas of town that you would want to see medical facilities. We're talking about forcing them into industrial areas. We're talking about forcing them into the areas where they have their adult entertainment. And so the request to me was, can we come up with something in statute that would prevent local government from doing that? And I said, well, that's a very fair request. And so we chose alcohol because what we have not received are complaints from people that say there are too many alcohol establishments. Come up here and restrict them. So we use that. But to your point, which is a very good one, in the Senate, they have used pharmacies. That is one of the part of the language that is being negotiated. And ultimately, that's probably where we're going to land when it's all said and done.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for your answer, Leader Rodriguez, again. I want to go back to the point that you just mentioned, which is that just because something doesn't necessarily hurt you doesn't mean that it's good for you. Do you believe that no medical benefits can come from smokable cannabis, and that's why it's been banned?
Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Speaker. I would not go so far as to say that there are no medical benefits, but what I would say is that the harms from those benefits outweigh the advantage that you would get from obtaining them from smoking, particularly when there's another way to obtain those same benefits without receiving the harm that comes from the smoking.